were very clear right from the beginning that it was going to be a peer-to-peer support group. So it wasn't Cherie and I speaking and leading this group. It was very much the support that they could offer to each other. And actually that has been one of the most beautiful things to witness and to be a part of, the way the women support each other so tenderly and so beautifully. But to get back to your question, we started off with our weekly coffee morning, and it just developed as we went on. So we quickly realised that actually, if we got the women sitting around a table doing something, doing an art project, that was when the conversation really started to flow. So so we started to incorporate that into each of our meetings. And you could just see the women just relax. We started to do trips out, trips to the theatre, trips to the zoo. And I actually remember so fondly one outing that we did to some gardens, and we were sitting on the grass and we were all having a picnic lunch and just really enjoying each other's company. And an elderly couple passed by and they said, "Oh, you seem like such a happy group." Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my goodness, mm-hmm. you have no idea. You have no idea. But I think that's just a real indication of the support that the women were able to offer each other, and just this place of knowing that they were just accepted and loved just for who they were, no conditions, no strings attached. So fast forward a little bit, and we then hit the pandemic, and for a time, meetings, face-to-face meetings, had to stop. So we think, okay, what do we do now? We were so aware that these women were so isolated and desperately needing support. So that's when we started working online. So an online virtual coffee morning, which continues and is now run by one of the women who's come through the group. So that's run by the women themselves. And we also offer a wellbeing course, a 12-week wellbeing program, which addresses all of the symptoms that these women are dealing with. They're all dealing with living with a legacy of trauma. And so the wellbeing group addresses in a very safe way all of the symptoms that these women are dealing with. So week by week, we look at issues such as depression, anxiety, grief, loss, disappointment, relationships, making healthy relationships. And the wellbeing groups have just really taken off. So now we have people joining from all across the country and beyond. And we currently have four wellbeing groups running concurrently. And it's just a really safe space for the women that they can very much come to on their own terms, in their own way. So that it might start with women not being confident about speaking in a group, maybe not even being confident to turn their camera on. But then by week 4, week 5, we just see these women just beginning to grow in confidence and just grow in their relationships with each other.
Yeah, one of the powerful things about the wellbeing groups is that we have moms who completed the course and they come on to actually help lead, and we pay them as sessional workers to come on. So we'll give them aspects of the course and ask them to lead on that. And that is probably one of the most powerful aspects of what we do, because I don't know the pain. These women are experts in this pain, but when they see other women who come on and they're leading, this is a huge, huge factor in helping them to realize, number one, I'm not alone, but there's hope for me. And we make it really clear within the wellbeing program, this is not a place where you tell your story. We know it's not counseling. This is a place for you to learn more about yourself. And we provide all the women with notebooks, and they're working on issues like, why am I angry? What am I overthinking about? But we do it with little video clips, and we did it in partnership with a charity called Kintsugi Hope, and they were incredibly kind to allow us to use their material and then adapt it particularly for these women. So we have the face-to-face groups in Ipswich, and then we have the online wellbeing groups, which cover, as Shuna said, we have women from Wales, from Scotland, and sadly, we would much prefer for there to be physical groups all over the country, all over the UK. That's our longing, and we really would love to see other people set these groups up. In fact, we are going up with a group of mums to Nottingham. It is Nottingham. Yes, to Nottingham, to do some training for a group that are wanting to set up. And Liverpool will be setting up in September. So they're their own entity, but we're just providing resources and training. So that's a real delight and a sense of great joy, because we have far too many women calling up and saying, is there a group in my area? And we have to say no, but we offer these online groups, which is a start and is a launch pad. And we have definitely seen the women grow through that. And what happened is, as a result of the group, 3 months is a long time, right, to be meeting each week. The women would cry. Some of them would cry at the end of it and didn't want it to end. So amazingly enough, another barrister, former barrister who lives in France, she was talking to me about wanting to get involved, and I said, would you be willing to do effectively a carry on beaming group? So she now runs that with another volunteer, Julie. The two of them run it online on a Monday night, so mums who've completed the course can then continue to meet. That group has now gotten big enough, so we're hoping with these next cohorts of mums that we'll set up another carry on beaming, but we need more volunteers for that.
So I have a next sort of question, and this widens out a little bit. Would you be able to tell us a bit, Cherie, about if you've noticed any sort of response to the program from those who are within the legal community?
Yeah, the response within the legal community has been really, really supportive. And I made cards in the early days and gave them to local firms of solicitors and to barristers to give to clients who were going through care proceedings, and they were giving them out. And we made it really clear we're not part of social services, but it's a safe and confidential place, where you're going to really be listened to. So that was really great. Then we had a firm of solicitors locally offer to support us monthly financially with a donation each month, which was incredibly kind. And it meant a lot to me personally to have that kind of support from someone locally who was saying, actually, we value what you're doing. I'm actually meeting tonight with 2 family law barristers. We're going out for dinner this evening to kind of talk about a collaboration that our mums can actually come and do some training for barristers about the effect of having been through the court system, but also the way in which the bar can actually and maybe assist some of our mums who are actually seeking contact or their difficulties. So we're going to kind of be exploring that through some meetings. So I'm really looking forward to that.
So it's clear that your organization does a lot of work with mothers who've been through the court system. And this is a bit of an open-ended question, but what do you think lawyers ought to know or maybe keep in mind when they're dealing with people who are in the midst of such a difficult process as they are going through the court system?
Yeah, I personally have regrets about my practice. I look back on some of the ways in which I cross-examined people. It wasn't hard to really show the vulnerabilities of people going through care proceedings. Parents in that situation, they're not there because everything's going well in their life. They're there because there's, as Shuna mentioned, significant trauma, not just one thing, but a litany of events throughout their life, which have including abuse, neglect, rejection. And I guess I would say to barristers working within the profession to maybe change the approach in which they deal with parents in these circumstances and listen. One of the things that, and it sounds really straightforward, like listen, of course I listen, but often we come with our own agenda. We know, us barristers are often very bossy. We feel we are the center of the universe, and some more than others. And we can go in with like, I'm just doing my job, get in there. But these are families, these are parents, which often have desperate, desperate need to be heard for once without a sense of judgment. And yes, of course, courts are going to be making judgment. We'll be making judgments about which evidence to use. But the way in which I used to question parents, and I might say something as simple as, well, what could you have done differently? But again, it's such a question that's riddled with judgment. And I very rarely actually listened to parents because my mind was already working on how I was going to use certain evidence in their case. And if I went back to the bar, I would definitely be a more active listener.
I guess it's just in terms of maybe it's a follow-up question about how we work with trauma and being trauma informed, and just being so aware that these women, layer upon layer upon layer of trauma, which means that they're constantly in this fight, flight, freeze place, so open to and reacted to by triggers, and when you're in that fight, flight, freeze place, you can't think logically. You can't. The part of your brain that thinks logically, that clear and thinks clearly, has gone offline at that point, and you're in that fight, flight, freeze place. So definitely in Beam, it's so important that we are so informed by that, and that we can just offer a really calm, consistent, safe space where the women know that there is no judgment. And as Cherie's mentioned, we would never ask somebody about what's happened to them. We would never ask them to tell us their story. That can be so traumatizing for them and for the other people that are listening. So we would never do that. But it's working to help support them manage the legacy of trauma that comes up in the symptoms that they're dealing with all the time.
The other thing I would add is, if you and I were asked to share the most painful thing that has happened in our life, or actually the most shameful thing that we'd ever done, we would, of course, not respond. We might make up something very small, like I stole a sweet when I was 5, where actually the parents going through care proceedings, their whole life is laid out before a group of strangers, and some of the most intimately, deeply painful suffering that they have experienced is then kind of dissected. And as a barrister, I don't think I really could understand at the time when I was practicing. Of course, I knew these things were terrible, but I wasn't thinking about these parents as people. And I remember actually a barrister saying to me, you mustn't think about them as people. I mean, I understood that they were human beings, of course, but you're doing a job. But if I was to go back to do this work, I would want very much to actually fight a little bit more for their voice to be heard.
And kind of building on what you've already mentioned about trauma, there is an ongoing discussion within the legal profession about what it means to be trauma informed. Within the Law Society, we have our trauma informed lawyer certification course, which there's quite a lot of interest in that. And I think within the profession, there is a bit of a movement within certain groups towards this. But what would you say lawyers can do to become more trauma informed?
Well, certainly going on the courses, I would say actually go and volunteer. You can volunteer 1 day a month, not even 1 day. You could give 1 hour. Everybody can give 1 hour and be a mentor we're seeking mentors for our moms, and we have women in professional capacities who say, look, I'll give an hour of my month, and some of them will meet for coffee, some of them it's just online. By actually meeting people, and relationship changes things when you actually come together, despite your backgrounds, but for your birth, you would be on the other side of the court standing in the witness box. More often than not, it is because of the circumstances of our own birth. And we didn't choose that, and we weren't worthy of that. So I would say that's a really big way to get involved with charities who are working with people who are vulnerable or who have had a real lack of opportunity in their life.
So this is my final question, and this is for both of you. I've seen legacy mentioned, and I've heard it mentioned quite a bit when people talk about the work that BEAM does. So what does legacy mean to you? What do you want the legacy of BEAM to be?
For me, I would love for other people to get involved and to go out and make a difference in their community. And, what is the purpose of our life? Is it just to accrue, greater wealth, more things? Actually having this intentionality to think, well, what is the purpose of my life? And within my family, building stronger connection. The bar can be all consuming. So I would say to encourage members of the bar and members of, lawyers, solicitors, to go out and make a difference. They have incredible skill sets, which are desperately needed within the voluntary sector. And that would be amazing. Yeah, I would love to see more and more of that happen, and a deeper connection between enabling birth mothers to actually be a voice for change within local authorities, having parent advocacy. I have lots of great dreams for how things could be different.
And then I guess in terms of BEAM itself, I think the legacy would be, our hope would be, that no mother would have to go through this on her own. That wherever she is in the country, that she would be supported through this, and helped. So I guess that would be our hope for the future of BEAM, that no woman would have to suffer this on her own.